Well, good morning, friends. Welcome to our first live stream conversation here at Coker United Methodist Church. We're glad to have you. Pray that you are staying safe. Pray that you are listening to our city leaders and county officials and whatnot and staying home, staying safe. Want to let you know that we are doing everything we can at this time here at Coker. We are working remotely now. Everybody is at home. There is an exemption in there that allows for streaming of religious services and whatnot, and so we'll continue doing that on Sundays, and we're going to try to continue to do this as well. Pardon me. But even as we are here this morning, we have moved out of the studio that we have here at Coker so that we can be 6 feet apart. And then there's a couple other folks in our AV area that are helping to run this right now. They are actually in separate parts of the room entirely. And so we are doing everything we can to continue to do our ministry, but be as safe and honor all of the requests being made of everybody right now. So hope you're doing the same as well. This is something that you and I wanted to do now for a while, and it just so happens that maybe this crisis has given us the bandwidth to do it. And so one of the things that Mark and I have wanted to do is to just spend some time in conversation and maybe let you all overhear some of the things that we're talking about and some of the ways that we think about different things. And so we want to have different topics of the day, as it were, once a week when we can get together and talk about all of this. And so we thought, what better topic of the day to launch with than all that is going on right now, COVID-19, coronavirus, everything like that. But we wanted to put a little bit of a different spin on it. By no means are we trying to downplay the severity of everything. That's not our intent at all. However, we do want to ask ourselves, is there a gift in the coronavirus? Is there something to say, you know what, I was blessed by this and I didn't expect that, the outcome of it or something going on because of it. And so we're going to kind of tackle this from that perspective today. And our conversation is completely unscripted. We actually haven't even discussed what we're going to say or even how we're going to end. Yeah, right. So if it just sort of peters out at the end, sorry about that. But we wanted it to be real. We wanted it to be authentic and true to who we are. So it could be 10 minutes. It could be 30 minutes. Who knows?
All kinds of built-in awkward silence.
That's exactly right, as we just stare at each other and go, I don't know what to say to what you just said. So, yeah, exactly. Nevertheless, so I'm going to start here. I'm going to pose it to you. Yeah. This was your question. You actually came up with this. What is there a gift in the coronavirus?
Right. Well, I think first, before kind of jumping into that question, I think it's worthwhile to consider just really the perspective that made me want to do this today. One is, you know me, I'm a big fan of conversation, and I think that's one of the things that that I struggle with some of the classic design even of how we do church, is that very often, spirituality and theology are such massive, amazing, mystical conversation or topics that so often, because of the amount of time that we allow for them or what we end up being able to do, they end up being a very kind of point A to point B experience, where the truth is that it is much more multifaceted. So I'm always a fan of having conversations. And I also think, especially today, I don't think this is just a facet of how we do religion, but I think it's also a facet of just how we do life right now. I mean, one of the reasons that podcasting is so big is because I think first of all, podcasting is a little bit of a Wild West. It's not managed the same way. It's not some network thing. I get that networks have them, but they're usually not very good. But it's this kind of real conversation that's just driven by people. And we have more and more, it feels like more and more, even though we have all these outlets, we have this increasing control over what we see. We can cultivate, almost curate our own realities based on our social networking and the algorithms and all that. And there's something about that makes conversation this wonderful kind of antidote to a certain extent. And so, I think that's something that really drives me for sure.
And it occurs to me now that if you're joining us in this conversation, you might not know who we are. Oh. If you don't go to Coker week in and week out. So maybe we should introduce ourselves.
I just assumed that my fame was just
That's exactly
understood.
Right. Obviously, everybody knows us. My name is Adam Knight, Reverend Adam Knight. I'm the senior pastor at Coker United Methodist Church. This is Dr. Mark Aaron Humphrey. He is our director for worship and music arts, or is it music and worship arts?
I don't ever remember that.
It's something.
I'm not sure.
It's something to that effect. So he does the music and the creative arts sorts of things at our church. I do sort of the preaching and some of the other general staff oversight and ministry at our church. And so that's kind of why we're here. So you're going to get a lot of the sort of the inside the box stuff from me. And then you're going to get the other stuff from him.
Basically, he's dad, and I'm the crazy uncle who comes for holidays to say awkward things, but to get later conversations started. Yeah.
So don't be surprised if he says something and I sort of respond with, I don't know what to do with that. So there you have it. All right.
Or that you will bathe that in prayer.
Yeah, exactly. So here we are. We're in the midst of social distancing. We have a new order from our mayor literally last night that goes in effect tonight at 11:59. It goes all the way through Maundy Thursday.
Right.
New realities all over the place and everything. My kids are at home right now doing schoolwork, all online, things like this. You and I have a meeting later today to plan a worship service, but we won't be together. We'll be in our homes doing it online. So I'm just curious, where do you see the gift in all of this?
Yeah, well, so for me, it's kind of both the personal sphere and the kind of cultural, societal sphere. I think, and those things kind of inform one another. And so, we experience things personally, and then we project that as we engage, and we are the creators of culture and society. So, to that end, what I look at in this right now are just what are the main themes that are coming up for me, or what are the things that I'm really experiencing unlike any other time. One, for me, is absolutely a loss of control.
Yeah.
Things that I thought I was in control of, I am not in control of.
Yeah.
And so that's and for those of us who have been through, I try to be as open and honest as I can in terms of speaking out of difficult things that I've experienced in my life, because I find it's the best way to kind of utilize that. If you're going to go through something that just really, strips you down to your studs, then why not get some good out of that? And so what are the lessons? So to that end, I think that right now, I think about other times in my life that I've lost control, or I've been, my illusion of control has been wiped away. And what did I come out of that with? And certainly there's this first stage of that it's scary, it's uncertain. There's a mourning, of like, here are things that I was treasuring, and this was, this was my thing, this is my kingdom, and it's just, so there's that kind of mourning process. But then there's this other side of that, what do they call the simplicity on the other side of complexity, where it's like, okay, I'm not in control, but there are things about that are beautifully freeing. And so I think that, and exactly what that looks like, we're all going to find out. But certainly I think that's one thing, just the loss of control. Two, I think I have lost the illusion of anonymity. And by that I mean, it's so tempting to just see yourself as like, I'm not connected to all these people are so far away. I mean, this the closest thing I would compare this experience for me to is after 9/11.
Yeah.
But this is fascinating because it's global. I mean, this is truly a global experience. Not that terrorism and other conflicts like that didn't have global implications, but this in that way is fascinating. And this also reminds me of what the sciences are telling us, the interconnectedness of all of the created world, and it's the truth.
Yeah.
And certainly we could look at Scripture and see that as well.
Sure.
But boy, are we aware of that. And so our decisions, just as right now, if you're deciding how much toilet paper you're going to buy, if you finally got into HEB, your personal decision has implications
for everybody else.
Way beyond. So those are a couple of things for me that are points of change, maybe even points of pain. But they're then, I think, okay, how can I've always had this little phrase, like, don't waste pain. And how can that pain be utilized in the future to maybe be, like I say, a force for good, a good change, you know? So those are a couple of mine. What about you?
You know, I tend to process things like this primarily in the two realms that dominate my life, which would be number one, my family, and what is this going to mean for us? How do we affect? How does this affect? And then number two, my church, the place that I am charged to lead. And so as these things tend to happen, I kind of live in those two places. Eventually, I get around to myself.
Yeah. Okay.
And I wish that it didn't take me quite so long.
Why? What do you mean by that?
Well, usually it's when I start running up against some sort of a wall personally as I'm trying to do everything in those two realms that I start to go, oh, shoot, I forgot to stop and kind of go, man, I'm not happy about this.
Okay.
Or I'm thrilled at this opportunity or whatever it is. And so, you know, as I think about all of this, there has been some adjustment and it's been hard. I do find it maybe, I'll call it God's prevenient grace or some special serendipity that spring break happened as all of this was transitioning. So it almost, rather than a jarring stop, there was a bit of a transition.
Right.
And so I'm actually going to call that one of the gifts in all of this, is that the timing worked out where there was this transition. And even the first announcement from the school districts was, well, we're going to extend spring break another week.
Right.
Okay, that sounds different than shelter in place.
Yeah. Right.
So there was a bit of a buffer there that I think helped in some of the transition. You can kind of, once that happened, you could kind of see the other stuff starting to roll.
Sure.
And so from a family perspective, I would definitely count that as one of those gifts, but something that we've had to figure out is how do we, you know, just like at the church, we've had to move an entire ministry online. How do you move a life that exists spread out here just whoosh, right like that? And so that's been a big conversation, and it's been a process that we've had to go through. When I think of it in terms of the church, here again, it's sort of the same. You could kind of see it come and feel it coming. Spring break is always a difficult time. So I think back, the last, help me out, I think this is true. The last worship service that we actually had together was the first Sunday of spring break.
Yes.
So that was Time Change Sunday. That was the first Sunday of spring break. Those are always a down Sunday in church world. Always. And when they pile on top of each other, it's like a double whammy.
Yeah.
When you're changing the time and it's the first Sunday of spring break. Throw on top of that then growing fear of this global pandemic. And I kind of showed up to church today and just hoped somebody would be here.
Yeah,
you know. So we were already kind of in that spot even the last time we gathered together. I had sent emails about, you know, we're cleaning everything. We're in here cleaning pews and all sorts of stuff like that. So we were sort of already in a prepared place when it came down, hey, we got to do this. We've been live streaming for a long time. We already had an online Bible study going this Lent. It was something we've tried to do it before, and we've already been doing content online, Bible studies, things like that. So when it came down to, hey, everything's got to move online, we were actually fairly prepared for that. It didn't make it easy to immediately upload everything online, but it was something that we were prepared for. And so that loss of the control, in one sense, allowed me to just go, well, this is what we got to do.
Yeah.
You know, and all the other meetings and all the other things that were needing to happen just sort of fell to the wayside, and we could focus. This is the fascinating thing, and I was telling somebody the other day, you know, with all the technology that we need and all the stuff that we're using now to continue to do church virtually and everything, one of the coolest things for a church like us that's fairly large, and we sort of steer away from things that we will often brand as, well, that's a small church thing or something like that. Well, you know, we printed out the roll, as it were. Everybody who's attended a worship service here at Coker this year got name, got number, whatever information we had, and we just started calling through.
Phone tree.
You know, phone tree, that whole thing, and just going, you know, how are you? How are you doing? You're not alone, and all of that. It almost gave space to do some stuff that we don't even think about anymore because of the size and the scale that we tend to deal with. And I just think that was a really cool thing for us on a church level to get to do, and we're still doing it, you know, still working through all of that. So I don't know. I processed through a lot of this stuff in those ways.
Okay.
And then I get around to myself, and I told you about a podcast that I listened to this morning and said, if you're easily afraid, don't listen to this because, you know, it paints a gloom picture. glum picture of what we're dealing with. But at the same time, it's allowed me to sit back and ask myself, sometimes a reset
Yeah.
isn't such a bad thing.
Now, I know you've talked about anxiety for you, and so as you kind of dig into yourself in this experience, you're just kind of present in that. For you, because I'm also thinking through how you're projecting into those other realms, is this lack of control? Do you think is that kind of a source of anxiety for you? Like, what are your triggers? Which, by the way, I'll put my cards on the table next. But I mean,
Sure.
what is it for you that you're? Because I think one of the things that's really vital, that at least my hope for this conversation is at a point that we in our conversation can get to a personal spot where people can see, like, I appreciate this kind of part of it, but how can we bring it down to be like, here's the deal, you know? And so, if at the risk of kind of putting yourself out there, what are you seeing in yourself as far as those triggers?
So this is interesting. And again, so I'm a Wesleyan theologically. What that means is I believe that the Holy Spirit of God is working throughout my life and at different points and places, including before I even understand what's going on. And so about a month, 6 weeks ago, something like that, I mentioned to the church, my family went to Disney World. Now I'm looking back on that going, oh my.
For a different reason than most people went back
exactly
on Disney
right.
with
so,
an oh my.
Nevertheless, and as we went into that, I decided I wanted to be fully present to my kids in this moment that we thought about and planned for and everything. And so I shut off all social media. And just decided I didn't do that. At the end of that week, I felt so different than I usually do.
Okay, how so?
My mind was clearer. My anxiety was down, despite the fact that I was around people that I didn't,
Yeah, there's plenty of other anxiety producers.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
But I was in a different headspace. I really was. And so when I got back, I said, you know what? I'm going to see how long I can hold out. And I just sort of stopped with Twitter. I stopped with Facebook. If I needed to get on Facebook real quick to repost something for the church or something like that, I would do it. But I realized I don't feel as disconnected from the world around me just because I don't know everything going on as it's happening. And so carrying that into this situation has been really fascinating because I actually find myself afraid now to open up Twitter.
Because of bad news?
Well, no, because of what it's going to do to me.
Oh, okay, suck you into that.
Correct. Yeah. It's going to suck me in. It's almost like some sort of a drug.
Yeah,
and
right.
So I told my wife the other night, I have to open up Twitter because I have to post the thing about the church being all online. And she said, okay, then do it. I said, but I don't want to. Like, I'm afraid that as soon as I open it up, I'm going to see something, I'm going to start scrolling, and it's just going to plague my mind. So what I've learned is that that's really one of my big triggers, is that somebody texted me after church last Sunday and said, hey, how's your anxiety? And I said, it's surprisingly low.
Okay.
Part of that's because I'm not feeding myself the things that I'm now realizing were a big source of anxiety in my life.
Yeah.
And so, I will watch the local news now because I do feel like I need to know what's going on.
Yeah.
Particularly as we're trying to make decisions for the church and the staff and things like that. So I'll watch the local news. I'll find out what I need to find. I read the newspaper. Shocking, but not the physical newspaper.
Yeah, right.
A digital version of the Express News. When I get super stressed, I go intensely local. And so if that's a personal thing, that means I kind of bore into my family and I wall off the house. When it's a community-wide thing, what that means is I stay San Antonio. I get it. It's bad in New York. It's bad in California. It's bad in those places right now. And there's nothing I can do about that. I can do something here. And so I tend to go real local. I watch the local news, I read the local paper, and I just sort of shut the other stuff out.
That's funny because I do the opposite in terms of, so first of all, if I have triggers, if I have a tendency, it's going to be more toward kind of introversion, existing in my head, numbing out. So that's my kind of thing. So I've had to be mindful of that, and so there's that. But with regards to going local, for me, I get super philosophical, abstract. That brings me, because kind of like what I said at the beginning, and that this sense of like, it comforts me to know through history and through understanding of culture the universality of the stuff I'm facing.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
if I can place that, be like, okay,
Okay,
you know,
yeah.
that helps me, that kind of landscape in a
Contextualize
sense.
it, yeah.
For sure, for sure. But then too, I also think, and this, I don't know if this relates to you or not, but it's because those types of things, like I was listening to an interview with an astrophysicist the other day, and just the implications of what we're learning, like I say about the natural world, to me it was just a fast track to a conversation with God. And that, because I kind of have, after having been raised in that evangelical kind of box, I'm certainly much more of a I guess a mystic in many ways. I mean, as far as like where are you to ask me, where do you really experience God? As you know, nature's a big thing for me, and just kind of you know, just mystic experiences are very big. And so I think that connection to just, you know, like I say, the natural world and those phenomena and philosophies and ways we've tried to, not just theologians, but philosophers and artists throughout time
Right.
have come around this question, to me is just a beautiful, that makes me feel, okay,
Yeah.
we're all in this together. Like,
Yeah.
that's my sense of like, you know, of place.
Absolutely.
So it's kind of so that's why for me though, one of the things that's important is to, for us in this conversation, is to get to a place of, okay, because we're right in the middle of it right now, but as best we can kind of take a pulse and say, what is it that we're experiencing now, and what are the lessons we're being taught right now that we don't want to lose? Because I think as those of us who went through 9/11, that was a fascinating trajectory because, and it was a very different political time, and a lot of things were very different, but there was this sense of like everybody coming together, and then slowly but surely, as the various sources of information began to point the various fingers, and you know, because there's money in separating us. I mean, you know, when you from in terms of like fear is a primal motivator.
Sure.
So if you're going to try to move a group of people, fear is a good kind of, you know, cattle prod. And I think that to me is a vital role, and to be very frank, in my perception, a missed opportunity, a misstep that we as a church have taken over time of like not being able to be that voice that certainly no one is saying this is no big deal, but to be that voice in the middle of this, okay, what types of fear are good? What type of understanding should we have? And what are these voices that we say, you know, right now, not that voice, not that voice. And I think that's, you know, to tip another card, my original idea for the topic, which I understand, Dad pushing back on Crazy Uncle, was what is it, the gospel of love politics or something like that?
Right.
Because, you know, for those of you who hang out with me at the mall, you know, I very often love to use the phrase that I feel like we as the church have rendered unto Caesar more than was Caesar's. Like, you know, we have and this isn't just true of the church. Just I think we're seeing this in society as a whole, where we've given governmental politics, red and blue, things that should have never been, you know, they've asked for it and we've given it, you know. And so now when we get into these places where we really, truly do vitally need objective voices. You know, I think about journalism having at least at one time been this kind of, so many of these institutions like the church that in order for human flourishing to happen, they need to maintain this certain identity above the fray. And my hope in this is that the church can then say, okay, how can we, as there's so much uncertainty, step into that place, but then not go back?
Sure.
Like, how can we not be red or blue as we go, you know, forward? And that isn't to say that there aren't questions that need to be answered that have certain governmental implications.
Sure.
But that would be, so if you talk to me about the gift, it's like there's a certain amount. I'm a big fan of of this cycle of construction, deconstruction, reconstruction. I think that's just a part. That's you know, that's birth, death, and resurrection. I mean, that's the cycle of life, and we're certainly, that's a perpetual thing. So as I see that with regards to this topic, I'm very interested to see how do we emerge from this. Changed in a beautiful way and hold to it. Kind of like you with your social media kind of thing. It's okay, how does this become kind of a sustainable.
A new normal.
Yeah, yeah.
A new normal. Yeah, I tend to, so my lens that I take things in really is more of a theological, biblical lens that I'll process. And I've just kept going back during this whole time to this idea of the Jubilee year in the Old Testament and
Okay.
how the land and the crops and everything, that it needed rest. I don't believe, again, Wesleyan, free will, that whole bit. So I don't believe that God is up there, causing these things. God did not cause coronavirus or anything like that. And yet I believe that God will redeem all things. And so it's almost, I say this in my prayer on Sunday, Lord, that there are times throughout history where you've sort of had to shake your church awake in the midst of something happening, going on. And I just keep thinking, the rhythms that we have in everyday life, the rhythms that we have in everyday American culture, these don't follow the way that we were created, the way that I believe we were created. Because they push efficiency and production to the points that there is no space for rest, for rejuvenation, for recreation, recreation, however you want to say it, in those places. And it's almost like in this moment, as tragic as it is in all these other places, there is this gift of stop, breathe, let the means of production or whatever you want to say, let it rest for a minute. And see what can happen in the midst of that. I think about you. There's a quote that originally started with Dallas Willard, that then found its way into a John Ortberg book that has now become the title of a book unto itself, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. But what Dallas originally said, and I'm gonna butcher it, was that we all need to ruthlessly eliminate hurry from our life, because hurry is the enemy of the spiritual life, of spiritual growth. And I was so captivated by that quote when I read it. I actually put it on the top of our staff meeting agenda here at Coker. So when we have our staff meetings, we have an online agenda, and on the top of that page, that Google Doc, it says that we have to ruthlessly eliminate hurry. And I remind the staff all the time that our job is not to program our people to death, to have so much going on so that we can compete with soccer and baseball and all the other, extracurriculars, dance, gymnastics, whatever, that are happening out there. Our job is to do the important things. And then if sometimes our job is to just say, there's a moment to rest, let's rest. And so I feel like part of God's redemption in this, part of the gift of it, is that we have this moment to rest. We have this moment to rest in our families. We have this moment to rest as a church. We have this moment to rest as a culture. And I hope that one of the things we take out of this is this idea that, difficult though it is, rest isn't always a bad thing.
Oh, sure.
Taking a break, reset, as it were, it's not always a bad thing.
Well, when I hear you say the word hurry, you're quoting Dallas. To me, that's the antithesis of being present and mindful. And just right here, right now. And certainly I think of the still small voice, of the Holy Spirit, and of just, we don't know, by the way, we're assuming that most of our audience is at least somewhat familiar with Christianity and kind of in that, headspace or belief space, whatever. But I want to also say, that regardless of your belief space or convictions, the notion of spirit and the notion of there being a world, an existence beyond what our senses can engage in, the most tried and true way to be aware of that is to just be present and calm and quiet and just, sometimes just taking in the miracle of just existence. And so that's what I hear in that. So that's certainly. I'm also, though, you talked about hurry and programming. I think too, we have a luxury. Many of us have a luxury of being able to spend time thinking about this stuff.
That's true.
And as I sit here, I think about, who could be watching this, or who could, be aware of what we're saying, to be like, that's great, but I'm working 3 jobs, my wife's working 2 jobs, or I'm a single parent, or whatever, and my reality is a constant, when am I going to get past the breakers and now this? And so, so I think for that, to me, the irony of that is I think from the outside looking in at that position, and isn't this the case so often, those of us in a place of privilege think, oh, man, let me give you some advice. I mean, for the people who have lived in that reality, certainly there's uncertainty, but in my experience, those have been the rock stars of like, it's all right.
Yeah.
We dealt with this before. Like,
Right.
I figured out how to make dinner out of this, and this before.
Right.
And so in that sense, I think, and again, that's the least of these, and that's people who so often in the hurry, and so often in the social media, these are flyover people.
Yeah.
Like, you're not some innovator in a way of, you're using a grandma wisdom here, but I think that's one of these, when this kind of forest fire comes through, it reminds us of like, yep, forest fires come through.
That's exactly right. I mean, I mentioned in my sermon at the very beginning on Sunday that part of this has helped me to realize again, and I feel like I'm constantly reminded about it, but again, I'm a very privileged person.
Yeah.
The fact that you and I can even be here to have the conversation right now speaks to our privilege.
Yeah.
And we've got to remember that. And so much of the ministry we do here tries to even address some of that, but it doesn't ignore the fact that, there are those out there for whom this rest that I am encouraging people to embrace, they don't have that luxury.
Well, and we are all in ministry. And if you don't like that word ministry, we're all in this together. We're all a part of human flourishing. And so being not in a hurry, being present means seeing people. And let me be real frank. Like my needle tends toward introvert, and so I can tend to kind of be in my own world. But the more I find that I just look in the eyes of people, and I just, I know this sounds very kind of maybe woo-woo, but like fully aware that is a human being, that is a soul right there.
Right. Absolutely.
The more that I engage with them in that way, the more open to, I think, then fully living into what I'm supposed to do and who I'm supposed to be. And sure, we're all wondering, well, how do you do that in this age of, come on, there's always a reason to dehumanize people around you. Social distancing is not a new thing in that sense, and so this is, well, how do you talk about the phone tree or various ways that we are able to be connected. I will say this, I have been, pretty critical of the internet.
Sure.
I got to be honest.
As have I.
Yes, and for good reason in many ways. But man, I'll tell you right now, am I thankful for the ability to feel connected and to feel like I can see people and to feel not alone in that sense. So, I think, and so then, how do we emerge from this with like, okay, there is a beauty in the internet. How do we protect that to a certain extent? It's in my mind for sure.
I listened to, we talked about podcasts that we listen to. I listened to one that's done by some Harvard Business School professors. And one of the things that one of them commented was that, the phrase social distancing right now, she said, we don't need social distance, we need physical distance.
Yeah, that's a great point.
We need social closeness right now.
Right.
And I thought, what a fabulous distinction, right? And because of these technologies, we have that ability to do that, where we can stay physically distant, but we can still connect socially. And I get so many emails from people from our church, that say this, thank us for that, please pray about this, have you thought about, all sorts of stuff. And we maintain that social connection while being able to be physically distant, which I think is a good thing right now for this moment that we find ourselves in, for sure. And so as I'm looking at the clock and realize we've been chatting here for about 35 minutes, probably want to start thinking about landing the plane. I don't know, or we could stare at each other for a little bit.
Right.
But let me just throw this out to you. What would be maybe a ribbon that you would tie on some of your thinking about this question of just our current reality, of the gifts of it? I like to talk about, tell people that life in general, the life of faith, the life of family, whatever you want to say, life carries with it natural tensions. Things aren't always as cut and dry as we want them to be. Scripture points to that constantly. I point it out in sermons all the time. There's a tension to be held sometimes. We're seeing that. There are some good things by our responses culturally. At the same time, it's incredibly hard for so many people. And so just with all of that, I don't know, what would be a final thought, a couple sentences that you would take with you on all of this?
Yeah, I think I would go back to something I said at the beginning. Don't waste the pain of this. Learn from it. Pain is inevitable. This is a unique type of pain for many of us.
Yeah.
But the more you experience pain, it's not that you look for it, but that you, if you're going to feel it, let's learn from it.
Yeah.
And how can I be better because of it? So I think that's the first thing. And then secondly, to just really be fully aware and convinced that you are not alone.
Yeah, absolutely.
That you are not alone in the cosmos, and that we are made for connection. We are wired for connection, to use the Brene Brown, phrase. That requires effort. It requires commitment to be in it. I'm another thing. I know I'm rambling a little bit, but I do think right now of marriages that are in a lot of trouble, that all of the hurry has allowed them, or it's a relationship with a child or whatever, but that, hurry has allowed them to, those conversations maybe not happen. And those very likely are conversations that need to happen with a therapist or with a moderator or some mediator. So to that end, we are going to help to extend some online resources for those of you who find yourself in that predicament, because right now, most likely, being sequestered is really the fuel on that fire. But yeah, so I think those things are very important to me. Don't waste pain. You're not alone.
Yeah. I think as I think about all that, I always come back to one of the things that's really important to me, and I know it's important to you too, is make sure that you find some space to laugh in the midst of all of this. Laughter is something that I believe is so very important. It's something that, at least here at Coker, we have tried to intentionally build into our worship experiences because we believe it's worshipful. We believe that there's something holy in just laughing. So in our house, we're watching through the Muppet movies right now because those are really funny. And we like to laugh. And so, find ways to laugh, find ways to do that. Whether it's a forced good thing, a forced bad thing, an optional thing, or whatever, if you can find some space to breathe, to rest, to recreate in this time, I would encourage you to do so. But then, the last thing that I want to say is exactly what he said. And I sent an email out to our church earlier this morning about the new mayor's declaration and how that's going to affect us and whatnot. But I said at the very end, the last thing that you need to know is that you are not alone. You're not alone in this. We are going to continue to do everything we can to connect with you and to help you feel like you're not alone, because you're not. And so in the weeks to come, as we continue this conversation, we want to find ways for you to interact with us. We're going to work to do that and see if it's possible. But just know this, whether it's on Sunday morning in our worship services and you're texting in a prayer request or commenting on Facebook and we're reading out, just remember that you're not alone. Whether it's here and you want to make a comment or something, you're not alone. Just please know that we are going to do what we can to help you feel that, but that my worldview, everything that I believe and hold very, very dear tells me that the Holy Spirit of God is present with you right now. Whether you're aware of it or not, whether you are a believer in Jesus Christ or not, I believe that the Holy Spirit of God is with you right now, helping you to know that. And so I just want you to take comfort in that this day.
I got a crazy idea real quick.
Yeah.
Just occurred to me, you know how we're doing this whole thing? You mentioned sending in prayer requests.
Yeah.
Because you can submit those not only ahead of time, but also during the service. What about this? We'll continue to do that. That's an important kind of lifeblood, I think, of this interactive element. But also, if you have some time, and let's call maybe that's a praise, like just prayer requests and praise. If you have some time to send us, what are some of the lessons and what are some of the gifts and what are some of the things that you're experiencing? Like, please do that. Please send those and we'll share those as well. And because I think both of those things need to go hand in hand. You mentioned the laughter, we cry together, we laugh together. And so, because I think that will also help us all to not only, not feel alone, but also be like, you're right. that kind of like encouragement. So yeah, maybe we do that.
Send those in. You've got, wherever you're watching, whether it's YouTube, coker.org, or Facebook, you've got a place you can comment down there. You can chat, whatever. Put those things in there. Email them, text us, whatever. We'd love to hear, where do you see the gifts? Where do you see the gifts of all of this, or the struggle, or whatever? And we want to hear those things as well. So thank you for being here with us today. I hope that this was a blessing. If for no other reason, you just got to listen to us and go, they're crazy. Why would you ever say that?
No, dude, I was well behaved today.
Yeah,
there was
you
like
did,
no
actually.
crazy uncle stuff.
You actually did really
yeah.
well. It's very hard not to just spin in these chairs, though, because they're very spinny. So this week here at Coker, we have some Bible studies. Tomorrow night at 6:30. 6:30. There's a Red Letter Challenge Bible study on Zoom. Thursday night at 6:30, Red Letter Challenge Bible study on Zoom. We'd love for you to join either one of those, be a part of what God is doing in our community. There's a Moms in Prayer group tomorrow, also meeting on Zoom. And then we're worshiping again next Sunday via online only. So 9:30 contemporary service, 11 o'clock traditional service in our sanctuary. We'd love to have you join us for any of those. Thanks so much for being a part of it. Thank you, my friend, for joining me. We hope to be back with you next Tuesday at 11 o'clock for another conversation. So we'd love to see you there.
Have a great week. Let us know if we can help.